Okay, hi, I'm Funkagenda. This is my studio at Toolroom Towers, and today I'm going to run you through some of the processes that I go through when I go to make a track. Well, first of all, what I'll do is I will show you just what I've got. It's like my basic auto load, because I think it's really important that you have as a producer, you're always going to have a series of instruments that you use every time. There's always going to be a series of effects that you use every time. So I think it's always a good idea to have those kind of pre-loaded up, as it were. So this is my Logic auto load. If I just zoom in, you can see we've got 20 audio tracks. That's obviously for when you're doing remixes and stuff. People send you a load of parts, you can just put them in all at once. Then I've got a Guru, just for programming extra bits of percussion and stuff. 3 Logic ES1s, 3 Logic ESX24s. Then I've got my hardware set up on external instruments. So we've got the Nord lead, the Moog over here, and the Korg R3, which is a massively underrated keyboard, I think. We'll play some sounds off that in a bit. I've got my Virus set up with all the 16 channels separate as well, set up on a multi-timbal thing, because there's some amazing sounds in here just for kind of, you know, sketching ideas out and stuff. And then I've just got some blank audio instruments at the end just for throwing some extra, bits and bobs in there.
Do you have an effects on your channel, master channel?
Not while I'm producing, because I think what tends to happen is if you put too many effects on that as you produce, you know, sometimes you forget to take them off. You'll bounce with the limiter, and everything will come out really, you know, really maxed and whatever, and it kind of starts to affect the actual dynamic of the instrument. So I wait until the very end to put the mastering strip on. I've got several different mastering strips which I'll run you through when we get to the end. Also, you'll notice I've got the hidden tracks button turned on at the moment, and that's because I also have a series of grooves from the various different bits and bobs, bits of software that I use. So if you come into here, you'll notice that on top of the normal Logic quantizers that I've also got Ableton's quantize set at 50 and 99, and I've got Guru's NTV swing, which is the kind of really hazy swingy one, set at 25, 50, 75 and 100%. Obviously, because I use Guru, sometimes it's easier to just, if you want to get things matched up and synced up really quickly, you know, and swinging in time with each other, yeah, you could use Logic 16C, but they're slightly off. So that sometimes you get like a little bit of flamming. So I've just made sure I've got all of these set up as well, so that you can just get everything synced really quickly. With my auto load for this one, I've got the screen set up. I've had these same screen sets now since like Logic 5.5. So like a lot of people like to use this keyboard editor at the bottom here, but because 5.5 didn't have that, or 6 or 7 in fact, I always had a separate one set up on button 6 where I could just go into the piano roll. So you'll find that like quite often you'll see the screen sort of whizzing around like this, like this. That's just as I'm sort of flicking through the things. My basic screen setup is, 1 is my main window for arrangement, 2 is the environment page, not the mixer page, because there's certain things that you can only do on the environment page that you can't do on the mixer. It's individual sort of routing things that you can do on this page that you can't do on the mixing page. So I always have this one set up on 2. 3 is the same as number 1, but with the audio being open. So it just saves me having to go up here and keep pressing the media button to bring the drawer out. I can just switch between the main window and the one with the audio bin if I need to access my samples. 4 is the main thing with the mixer page opened up at the bottom. 5 is the actual mixer, and obviously this one, you know, I use for sort of quick references on the mix down, and also for rearranging plugins and multiple, changing sort of things on multiple outs and whatever. although, like I say, I tend to favour the arrangement the environment page, because it's the one that I've always seen from all the old versions. 6 is my piano roll, and then number 9 is like a kind of really zoomed out kind of overview of the whole track. So if I'm going to start a track, obviously I always start with a kick drum. I've got a lot of sample libraries. To be honest, way too many sample libraries. I should really. Here we go. I've got a whole.
Any particular favourites?
Yeah, I must admit, Dead Mouse's new one's very, very, very good. And obviously all the Vengeance stuff's great, but it's a little bit overused now. But I'm actually currently working on my own sample library, and I've been using a lot of stuff from there recently as well. You know, some of it's sampled, some of it's created, you know, but it's all kind of, you know, it's stuff that I've picked myself and stuff that I've processed myself. So we'll go into there for the kick drum. This is one that I just added the other day, which I really kind of like, which is just kind of a really good sort of solid housey kind of affair. I mean, there's a lot in there. I usually start around about 126 BPM, but sometimes that can change. Like something, you know, sometimes, you know, you'll nip out for 5 minutes and you'll come back and it feels like the whole thing's a little bit too rushed, so I might want to knock it down. But also, whenever I copy stuff, I always I don't just use the alternate key for copying. I actually do everything as aliases, because I find when you're looking at this, when you start to copy just using alternate, you start to get all these things running down the side of the screen, all these different versions of the kicks, and you find it really difficult to isolate single bits of audio that you're working on. So I always use aliases.
So what's the different keystroke for that?
It's holding down Alt and Shift, and that, as you'll see, you can keep copying, but you still only end up with just one referenced kick. And then obviously if you want to make an edit, like you want to flip one or reverse one, or, you know, alter a particular one's different length, then you can just create one individual copy by not holding down Shift. And it just kind of minimises the amount of workflow that you've got going on in your audio bin.
Better for your computer as well, I guess.
Well, obviously, yeah, because you're not using multiple versions of each sample, you're just referencing one individual point. That helps to reduce the amount of hard disk sort of accessing that's going on. So I find it really keeps the CPU down as well. One of the tricks I used to have when I used to use a PC was I had Logic 5.5 back then, and my processor wasn't particularly good, and it would keep. Once you've got a really big track in there, it would really start to struggle and stall. So I used to go back through and then start replacing all the audio that I'd used with aliases, and that used to really sort of take the CPU load down. So also I make sure I never max out the channels. So a lot of people probably start and they just go straight in at sort of at 0 or 100% or whatever. But I always start about 60 with my kick drums, and then just turn the system up and work from there, because it means you won't get a distorted recording then, or nothing's too overdriven. So that'll be like the basic sort of starting point. Generally I'll reach for, you know, get something in on Guru, like maybe just like hats and claps or whatever. But it kind of depends what I'm working on in terms of the track. I think today we'll go for something just maybe like a little bit kind of funkier and upbeat, and, you know, something that's not so dark. So I'm going to go for quite a live sounding clap. Again, I think I'll probably go for, I've got quite a few bits knocking around in my own sample CD for this sort of sound, so let's just take that off. See, I quite like that, so I'm just going to roll a little bit of the bottom end off it using Guru's filters. This is a brilliant little trick on Guru. I mean, you know, obviously not really a trick, but a lot of people don't use don't tend to edit the pads very much when they're in there, you know what I mean? But I find it's, you know, using stuff like the low cut or the high pass filters just to sort of shape the bottom end of your snares and your hi-hats. It's really nice. So you can just get you can hear, you know, the sort of difference. About there keeps it quite live. I'm just going to take the back end off as well. I do a lot of, I like my samples to be really kind of clean and tight, so I tend to sort of do a lot of editing, whatever. Now, here you can see where this has been done. There's a sort of the kick sort of starts there, so there's a little bit of pre-clap. So what I've got to do is I've got to shift the snare back a little bit so that the little pre-clap comes before the actual kick. And the way you do that is if you go into the graph editor, there's a whole series of things that can be altered with Guru along here. The one we're looking for is the shift graph. You'll see it switches to the top there, and then if you push this up, it's going to push the snare forward, and if you pull it down, it's going to pull the snare back. So what we want to do is just pull it back so that it sits so that the clap just drops before you can hear the difference between this one kind of sits on the beat now and that one doesn't, so I'm just going to copy that over. And that gives you that kind of nice live sort of feel on the clap. And we'll go, I think we'll just use that as the basis. A lot of the stuff that I do, I don't tend to work very much with presets. You know, because I think they can be a little bit mind-blowing. Sometimes you'll go on there and there's, you know, you'll open up a brand new synth from someone like, you know, like Arturia or something like that, and there's like a million presets by a million different people, and you know, they've all got these crazy names, you know, and in your head you know what you're looking for, but it can take so long and so much flicking to just go up, you know, plus and minus on things, to go through the programs. It can take forever. So I really like to start with just really plain simple sounds and then work them up into presets. So one of my favourite ones that I use is ES1, which is obviously just a standard Logic, you know, a standard Logic synth. So I think we'll go for something quite, you know, quite chordal maybe, like quite a funky little. I like. I'm going to stick the quantize onto Guru's swing. We'll just re-quantize that so it locks in with the swing. So we'll go with that. Now, I'm kind of really anal with things. A lot of people like the kind of whole, you know, they like things to sound really live, so they'll leave the different velocities and stuff like that, but I'm kind of really OCD about these kind of things. So I always like to make everything to sort of, you know, everything sort of match up lengthwise, and everything to be really sort of really tight and very computery. I suppose, you know, we've spent so long designing these things so that we can make everything really accurate. So I kind of want to use that to its full potential. So what I always do is, say with a riff like this, where it's kind of really sort of choppy, I want to get everything the right length. So if you just grab one of the notes and hold down Alt Shift, it instantly grabs all of the parts and then turns them to equal length. So you can just grab grab all the keys there. I'm going to move that one forward because I'm not really happy with that. That's better. And the same goes for the velocities. Like for this particular sound, hold down Alt Shift after you've highlighted them, and if you just click on one, they all follow and become the same, all the same colour and all the same velocity. ATFC showed me those keys, so cheers Aiden, thank you. And then what I'll do is I'll start to play around with the sound a little bit more once the sort of part's in there. So this keyboard's got, this synth's got such a brilliant interface. It's kind of like half of it's really traditional. The whole, you know, the cut off and resonance and whatever is very similar to your classic kind of synths. But then when you get down to sort of this section here, it's a little bit different. Like normally you'd have a full envelope like this one to modify the filter, but this just gives you like kind of a decay envelope and an attack envelope. You can't really mess around with the middle of it too much, but it's really good for doing sort of stabby sort of chord sounds. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to roll. I'm going to go for kind of like the same sort of vibe as the Man with the Red Face sort of lead on it. So we're going to pull that down so you can hear it's kind of really. It's clicking a little bit on the way in and out, so I'm just going to alter the release as well, just to smooth it off. Get a little bit of resonance on it, and then I just want to get some pluck on there, so we'll start about there, and we're just going to move and that gives you that kind of really sort of housey kind of plug. I can probably pump the volume of that a little bit more by bringing the velocity up from the bottom, so it's not quite as deep on the velocity. One of the tricks I tend to use with, once I've got the sound sort of shaped how I want, which is kind of, you know, that's kind of the sort of thing we'll be going for. One of the tricks I tend to use with EQing is, if you look at Logic, they give you a mass of presets, but there's never going to be a preset that sort of says, you know, like Man with the Red Face, lead EQ or something like that. You know, there's never going to be something that exactly like what you're looking for. But if you go for the kind of closest match, I tend to find that's a really good starting point. So with a sound like this, I always go for, if you go into the guitar presets and you go to the electric funk guitar, it gives you this brilliant curve in the kind of presence area of the sound, and that really gives you a nice kind of. It distorts a little bit because it goes quite high up, so you got to pull the gain back down. But it gives you a really nice pluck at the top. Sometimes it's a little bit overpowering, so I'll bring that down a little bit, and then maybe add a little bit of air to the sound as well, just using the top end. And then I'm going to stick this on a 6 dB cut and just roll the bottom end off. But you see, it's such a gradual curve, you don't really lose too much bass on the sound, you just get rid of the muddiness at the bottom. So there's the sound, but obviously that's got a lot more bite and a lot more sort of attack to it. Reverbs, again, I mean, I'm really a big fan of Logic Space Designer, and I use the same sort of technique with this as I do with the with the EQs. I try and go for the closest kind of match to an instrument that will be doing this kind of thing. So again, guitar reverbs are always really good on this kind of plucky sound because they give you a kind of a plate or a slap back kind of effect that's really funky. So if you look at something like, say, there's one here, short guitar plate. I always take out all the reverbs down to naught first and then roll them on rather than have them come on full and roll them off, because sometimes I think you can trick yourself into having way too much reverb. Although then again, it could be me not having enough reverb. But I'll kind of roll this on now, and it should kind of bring a little bit of life into the sound. I mean, that's about it really. And it just gives you the kind of impression that rather than listening to a software synth, you're listening to kind of a guy in a room or something like that, you know? And we can just try that with the... So it's got a nice groove to it. Another really brilliant trick on Space Designer, which Mark showed me the other day actually, and I've been using it ever since, is right across just in the side here, there's an EQ button, which I'd never noticed before, and this just lets you just EQ the reverb on the way out. So a lot of the time what you can find, if you've got, you know, your keyboard part's got reverb on and your lead's got reverb on, and some of your drums will have reverb on, and maybe your delay, like bass has got a bit of delay or something, and everything kind of gets a little bit muddy at the bottom end, and it's great. You can just roll a little bit of the bottom end off here, just kind of maneuver it round and just kind of clean up the reverb, if you like, so that it's not. You just get the important part, the bit that cuts through, rather than have all the mud as well. The way I was doing it up until I found out about this is I'd literally just switch the channel. So I'd leave that off. Let me just turn that off for the moment. I'd leave that off, and what I would do is I would have the Space Designer at the top, and then the channel EQ second. I mean, which is the other way of doing it, although it does provide the same kind of EQ across both then. But that does the same thing. I'm cutting the bass still off this sound, but it's also taking it off the reverb as well. And that kind of keeps the sound kind of clean as well. But I'm going to do it the other way for this one, because I think it's probably a little bit more lively, a little bit more what I'm looking for. And you'll notice it's kind of, because of the resonance and the kind of punch that we've put on, the presence that's on the EQ, it's still kind of clipping a little bit here. I'm going to compress the sound anyway, because I think when you put compression on stuff, not only does it act as a really good leveler and keeps everything in check, but it also brings up all the bottom frequencies and makes things sound quite rounded. But I don't like overdriving stuff into the compressor, so what I'll do is I always stick a bit crusher on, take all the drive off, smash the resolution up to 24-bit, but then I just leave the downsampling just as it is. And basically what that does is it doesn't so much act as a limiter, but it just clips everything off when it hits 0. So you'll see now, like, I could push this right up to 90, and I can turn the channel EQ all the way up, and it shouldn't. It'll stay at naught. So you can sort of like drive the sound a little bit harder and get a little bit more volume out of it without it actually pushing into the distorted sort of area, the clip zone, as it were. So that kind of just makes the sound behave a little bit more. And compressor, just again, nearest match is probably. I think there's a really good preset for this kind of sound. This is off one of the old Logic 7, presets, which you have to go through a really long-winded way of installing Logic 8 to do this, but you have to kind of like install Logic 7 first, then install Logic 8 and make sure you don't tick all of the buttons that replace all of your presets with the new ones, and you can get all your old Logic 7 legacy ones back as well. And there's a brilliant one called Pick and Guitar Compressor, which just kind of really adds a really nice kind of pluck onto the sound. So we'll just go with that for now. So it's quite an upbeat sort of vibe. So I'm just going to throw just an offbeat hat in there as well, just to start picking the pace up. For this one, I'm going to reach into Dead Mouse's library, Dead Mouse and Steve Duda's library. Very simple, but it's kind of, sometimes that's all you need. You know what I mean? You can go. I think with a lot of the tech house and stuff that comes out at the moment, it seems to be this a kind of a mentality where you have to plug gaps. Like if there's a gap in the drum beat, oh, I've got to put something in there. I've got to put a click in there, or I've got to put a clave in there. Or and sometimes I think what better than that is the space that you get in between beats. I mean, if you listen to some of the stuff that, like say, like Dubfire or Oliver Hunterman's doing at the moment, like their beats can be really stripped back, and it can just be like, you know, like a sort of a kick and a perk and a snare, and that's it. And yet the whole thing just feels moving because there's so much space to groove. So I think probably less is more in the case of this sort of stuff. Now, one of the, if I'm going to go for sort of bass lines and stuff, there's a few different things I use. For stuff that, if you want really good sort of like kind of software bass and you're a Logic user, either the ESM or the ESP are probably both really good synths to use. The ESM, the monophonic one, which kind of like their 303 sort of emulation, has actually got a hell of a lot of bass on it. If you know, it's got a really good rounded sort of sound, and the controls are really easy to use on it as well, so you can get right in there and sort of really get the sound sort of exactly as you want it. So I'm probably going to write from this one and then maybe transfer it over onto some hardware afterwards. So. That's like real basic, just kind of following the groove sort of thing. I mean, we might elaborate on it a little bit later, but I don't want to. again, I don't want to make it too busy, you know, because you need that kind of space, I think. Not quite happy with that note there. I'll drop that back down. Yeah, that's better. I'm just going to shrink this. If you make those notes kind of nice and short, it gives it a little bit more of a stabby sort of feel, a little bit more like a live bass. And then I'm just going to even off the velocities. And you can get some really amazing, if I just solo that, you can get some really amazing sounds out of this, particularly the square on here, which is quite rough and raw, but what I tend to do is I'll whip the cutoff all the way down and then just open up the filter envelope on it. Particularly for the deep house kind of stuff, this is brilliant. It's a lot more kind of rounded sort of sound, a little bit of resonance, just to give you a kind of more so if we just pump that up. And add the other end. I tend to try and mix as I go and get the volumes as close to perfect as possible, obviously just to save time, and because it's a lot more easy, you know, it's a lot easier to do this than, you know, before when you used to record things like bands and whatever and you've got a whole mixing desk, just getting the music in there was hard enough, and so the mix down was a whole separate process. Now that computers have moved on so much, it's so easy to mix as you go. You know, generally it can be, the finished product can be there, you know, sort of for your mix down, could be there before you've even finished the track. I quite like that. We're feeling that. I'm just going to mute that off for the moment. I'm just going to go through some little bits of hardware. Obviously, the Nord is a favourite of mine, particularly for these kind of analog sort of sounds. It's a little bit fiddly to go through the presets, and the screen's so small on the old version. I don't know whether you can see, but I mean, literally all you've got is a load of numbers. A really good tip for anyone who's got hardware like this, or like the Moog as well, is if you go onto the websites, you can download the manuals. And if you keep the manuals on your studio computer as reference, it's really, you can generally then find, you know, I always come into, like say if I go into the Nord manual, I keep all my program banks on screen. And because you've got a search function on macOS, you can just do things like, say if you were looking for a bass sound, you can just type in the word bass, and then all of these here are anything that's in the program banks that have got the word bass in them. So you can flick through and instantly it'll give you the numbers or whatever. So it's not quite as good as having the hardware as a plugin, but it certainly makes finding sounds a lot quicker than having to leaf through a kind of paper manual and or just, you know, keep selecting numbers. There's so many sounds on here. I mean, you know, I'm not going to go flicking through them because literally we'll run out of tape. And then also you've got the manual mode, which kind of turns it into a kind of a big version of the ES1 or whatever. So I'm going to slip this into manual mode for now, which is that one. years that the last thing I was making on here was white noise. So again, you've got a brilliant filter section, a brilliant envelope section. So we're just going to turn everything up to full. I like to start with a sort of a completely blank canvas. I'm going to just mix. Let's just turn this down. Get this so that it's all back in the middle. It's such a great sound when you're detuning this thing as well. Like quite often, a lot of the build-up noises and stuff that I used to use when I first started producing were just, you could get this sound and you could just kind of pitch it up and do all this kind of business. And then also you've got this great LFO on here that's so vicious that you can like all the you make some fantastic build-up noises with that, but we're going for something a little bit more sedate today, so going for a similar sort of sound to the one that we got. So I'm just gonna open the release a little bit to make it a little bit liver. Bring the cutoff down, a little bit of resonance, and then just open the envelope up on the filter. I mean, to the untrained ear, there's not a lot of difference. Even to my ear, there's not a lot of difference actually. But what you tend to find is these are kind of like, they give you a much more live kind of sound, and a much more the sound itself is more exciting. It just seems to be a little bit more. It seems to have a little bit more body and a little bit more presence, you know, because you know it's being created like there for you. So. It's just A, B. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to play those next to each other now and see which one kind of. Oh.
Yeah, the first one.
Second one's a bit quiet, I think. See, that one's got more body, but the first one. Let's kind of see if we can tweak them. Bit more res. So they're getting closer now. But I think this sounds a little bit hollow today, so I'm probably not going to go with the Nord. Yeah, the ESM's definitely moving more air, so we'll go with that for now. Again, I'm just going to copy these across. Now, if you're copying audio and you do the Alt-Shift thing, that makes the aliases. With MIDI, I don't bother, to be honest, because the data's so small, and I like to be able to just jump into a MIDI part immediately, whereas it's less likely that I'm going to have to jump into an individual audio part and edit it. It's probably just going to be a repeat of one that I've already used. Whereas with the MIDI parts, it's going to be a little bit more, you know, I might want to alter a single bass note or a single note, so I don't want that alteration to affect all the other ones. So I don't use those as aliases, I always do those as actual copies. So what we kind of need now is maybe a sort of some form of sort of pad or electric keys or something like that. So I'm going to start maybe, let's try the Korg. This keyboard, I bought this when Mark and I started working on our sci-fi disco project. We wanted something that was going to give us really, really good 80s sounds. And obviously you can get that from all the hardware, but this was so instant. I mean, it's got a vocoder with a gooseneck mic and everything, which I took off because it looks ridiculous, but it sounds brilliant. But the actual presets and stuff in here are a really good starting point. So I'm just going to go in for like a kind of some vintage poly sounds. Just see if we can boost that up a little bit. And again, it's very kind of instant sounding. Yeah, great filters. Got a good old stuck MIDI note there. This is what happens, unfortunately, when you use older stuff. It does tend to stick MIDI-wise. So we'll just reset that. It is a little bit prone to stuck notes, that one, actually. So Korg, if you're paying attention, sort it out, please. See? What did I tell you? I'm going to change the quantize on this. I know I've been doing it to Guru swing, but obviously you can see this this part. We've only got just a note starting on the start of the bar, and a note starting on an 8th beat there. So if I quantize that to 8 beats, it's still going to stick with the groove, but it just means that it's going to lock them. It's going to lock them right onto the center of onto the start of the bar. Another great little function which I've got set up on a shortcut key. It used to be Shift Tab on the old version of Logic, on Logic 7. On here, it doesn't have one, so you have to set it up, but I've got it set up on Shift and the button above Tab, because I just keep accidentally hitting Tab anyway. And that is, you'll see it under here, it's Note Force Legato. And what this basically does is if you hit that button, whatever your key command is, it forces all the notes that you've laid down to just run to the end or to the start of the next series of notes. The great thing about that is, obviously, if you want to do something like this where it's a really, really long kind of sustained sound and you want it to go right up to the point, right up to the wire until it changes chord, it's just a simple, you know, I mean, even if they're kind of like way back sort of here, you just Shift Tab and it pushes them all to the end and pushes them all to the end of the bar. Bring the velocities in. just going to check the, let's just pull the resonance down a little bit, because it's a little bit whiny, that is for me. This synth also is the synth I used for the bass drone on Man with the Red Face, which again actually is just a preset which I will show you, because I'm pretty sure there'll be a few people out there that would quite like to see that one. If I remember rightly, it was this. And then I just rolled all the delay off the end of it and dropped it into the, let's just reset that. There we go. I can't quite remember what the notes were, but that's it. And then obviously just to excite it all up, you can, it's the cut off it is. I'm not sure how much of it you'll actually get on the DVD at home, but this, I mean, for a synth that cost me no more than about £400, the actual amount of air that this shifts on the low notes is a I mean, we can all feel that. It's really, and it sounds so kind of so analog as well. I mean, you know, I know that's kind of the idea of it, but sometimes you know you get these things that are kind of like analog modelled, and you listen to them and they sound good. You know, the filter squeal and the cutoff is really nice, but it doesn't really sound like analog. But this one does. It's got some really other really great sounds on it as well, but I mean, I'm going off topic. So we'll get back to the chords. Now what I'm going to do is this is kind of like a really old school way of doing things, but it's really useful. Whenever I've got something that requires MIDI automation rather than Logic's you know, standard automation that you can do here, I always record it on a separate track, because then you don't, you know, you can put the automation in, but you don't actually, if you need to change it for any reason, you haven't got to alter the notes, you haven't got to alter anything within the part. You can leave this part exactly as it is, open up another part that is kind of like a second, you know, a second version of that. If we just go to the software instrument, I just look up the Korg R3, which is there, and now I've got the same channel again, and then all I'll do is I'll record my automation data on here, and that will you know, that'll prevent me from sort of accidentally losing anything, and also means I can copy the automation data across and layer it under individual parts. It's a really simple thing, you know, it's nothing sort of like particularly clever or anything to write home about, but sometimes it's these kind of things that are the most important things, I think, like some of the kind of easiest things to do, that in order to make your life a hell of a lot easier. All of the hardware in here is wired with both MIDI ins and MIDI outs, so it means that I can record the control data from all the knobs on all the bits and bobs sort of as I go. I mean, I tend to always edit it again afterwards, just because you know, you can get it a lot sort of tighter than when you're just doing it manually. But this always gives you a great sort of starting point. So. We'll start about there. And now you should be able to see when I open this up, there's our MIDI control data. So I'm just going to make that really, really tight now by, I always look for, you know, whatever the sort of lowest point is, which appears to be this section where it's 89 here, and the highest points, and then I kind of like map in between those. So it's just, I know I kind of want that to restart at the start of the bar, so, because that's when this one starts. So I'm going to pull that up to 105 there, and then again take that right the way down to 88, roughly about there, and then delete that back up to 99. So that obviously goes back to where it left off. I think when you're using parts like kind of pads and stuff like that, you should always try and get just a little bit of movement into them. Even if it's just a tiny bit of filter movement, it means that the sound kind of evolves rather than is just, you know, just kind of that one kind of droney sort of, you know, sound. You get a kind of evolving sort of pad, and you know, it hasn't got to necessarily, you know, kind of sweep loads like the sort of things that you get on presets, but you know, just a little bit of movement just means the sound is a little bit kind of more lively. One thing I do suffer from with this setup is I do get a little bit of latency with the offboard gear. For those of you who obviously have, you know, who have dealt with that sort of thing, obviously you know what latency is and whatever. For those of you who don't, it's kind of like the lag between the signal being sent from the MIDI output and sort of being picked up on the hardware and to the notes actually playing. So what I kind of get is they tend to play just a little bit after all the others, and it can make them sound kind of out of time. One of the easiest ways to get around this on Logic, and Ableton's got a similar thing as well, is just in the top corner here you've got a in your section where you keep all your quantize and whatever, you've got a delay switch, and if you just switch, if you just get the parts that you want to delay, with this keyboard it doesn't tend to have that much latency, and I tend to find that if I knock it back 192nd note, which is that one there, it kind of fixes it. So it's kind of tight on the beat. I'm going to subdue that quite far down in the mix, and then what I want to do is I want to kind of make the pad a little bit sort of airy and you know, sort of a little bit kind of. One of the things I loved about the old digital workstations, things like the Korgs and stuff, is all the sounds sounded like they got so much like air on them. You know, you'd hit the notes and everything seemed to have this kind of sort of effect whenever you hit the pads, and I really miss that with all these kind of analog models sort of things. They tend to lose some of that beauty that the digital sounds have. It's one of the great things Native Instruments have managed to capture with the FM8. Is they've kind of crossed analog sort of flexibility and sounds with that kind of really crisp digital brilliant sounding synth. One of your top scorers, I believe, in the gear tests. I'm going to start putting a little bit of air onto this sound now, so I'm going to go into a few of the other sort of plugins that I'm really into. One of the best ones I found for adding air to things is definitely the UAD Neve 107.3. A great thing about these is they give you the two versions of them as well, like the light version and the other version, so you can put the light versions onto the channel strips and it doesn't sort of it doesn't start sort of chockering up the CPU of the card. And again, preset wise, there's a few really good ones on here, and one of the ones that I like here is just this one. It's just called High End Sweetener. It's normally a master preset, something that you stick on the end, but I kind of tend to use it as just a thing, just to sweeten the sound up a little bit, just to really put that sort of top end sizzle back on. Kind of like that. The UAD stuff's fantastic anyway. I mean, there's some great plugins and stuff. Dreamverb as well. If you want to get a really kind of really lush sort of reverb on the go, this thing's fantastic. It's a little bit harsh when it kicks in because it tends to be everything tends to be set very wet, but if you just get the mix kind of set right, and it gives you a really good sound, really good spread. And then I'm just going to throw an EQ on the top of that as well, and just move that behind the Neve. I'm going to throw an EQ onto it and just roll off some of the bottom end. You also might have noticed from watching me for a while that I have a really bad habit of not saving things. And I've lost many tracks like this because I'm a div. So well, I'm just going to save this to the desktop now. So now we've got a really nice kind of airy put the delay back on. And then just to kind of bolster it up a little bit, I'm just going to throw a quick electric piano in there as well, Rhodes kind of vibe, because I think that's kind of the sound we're going to go for. There's a lot of Rhodes simulators out there. Personally, I think Logic have nailed it with the EVP. They haven't changed it since 5.5, so I think they must be reasonably happy with it. And I'm just going to knock the. I've copied the same part over that I used for the chords. But the velocity is a little bit low, so I'm just going to throw it up to give us that nice kind of bell tone that you get on the Rhodes. And obviously remember to take the channel delay off, because this doesn't need delay compensation. A wicked way of introducing a bit of movement into these sort of things. I tend to use things like Logic's tremolo quite a lot, but rather than using it as a tremolo device, I actually kind of use it as an auto pan. So what you do is you open up the tremolo here. You can see it's a really basic kind of setup. You've got the rate at which the tremolo runs, the depth at which it runs, so like how far to each side it goes, how big the gaps are in between each sort of peak, as it were, and then the sort of smoothing and the phase. So what I tend to do is I tend to lock it onto sort of half a bar, and if I just solo this pad, you can hear it going from speaker to speaker, and then I'll just bring that down so it's a little bit more manageable, and that just kind of injects a little bit of a stereo image into the track. Favourite plugins I've got here. For strings, I tend to use the East-West Symphonic Orchestra. They're a hell of a lot of money to purchase, but they are kind of the best, to be honest. I mean, I haven't come across anything that I think that I found that sounds more realistic. Very easy to use, you know, straight into the orchestra section, pick what sort of strings you're looking for. So I want to go for kind of like a large string sort of sound, and I want something that's a little bit, what's the word, marcato, kind of quite stabby. So let's have a quick look. Instruments. There we go. Big sound, so they take quite a while to load. But they are pretty much, they're great for those kind of kind of a little bit of a double going on in there, which I'm going to get rid of because it sounds a little bit forced. But you can sort of, with this plugin, you can really hear like the articulation on the strings, so it kind of sounds really just going to change that electric piano slightly. going to select the bottom there, make sure that's quantized on the beat. Force legato on them. But obviously it's only gone up to the first note there, so we'll just have to stretch the back out. A great little tip here for if you've got, you'll notice that this is kind of slightly overhanging at the back end of the bar. Logic's got a brilliant little thing called the event float, which I think the actual shortcut key normally for it is Alt E, I think. But I tend to use, I've just got it set on F, which is the old button for it. Again, to keep everything as it was on Logic 6, because that's kind of what I was more familiar with. But what it gives you here is the start point of any selection of notes and the end point of any selection of notes. So if you want to bring them back, if I just zoom out so you can see, I can actually get the notes there and just pull the length back, and you can kind of fine tune exactly what you want. So if I just zoom in there, I can send that a little bit further. There we go. And that's just kind of trim those off. And then I'm going to go into the top section of that and also just get the quantize right. There we go. Sometimes my key sets play up a little bit. Again, another thing that's a little bit unpredictable about Logic, but I kind of like it. It's sort of, it keeps you on your toes. It's kind of more the vibe we're going for with our sci-fi disco sort of thing. A little bit less housey, a little bit more soulful. What I'm going to do with this, one of the best tools I think in Logic is the stereo delay, because it's got so many different things you can do with it. It works brilliantly as a standard delay, which is kind of what I'm using it for here. But also it's really good for using to sort of give you a nice bit of stereo separation. You can slightly delay one channel so that it kind of widens it out a little bit and gives you a little bit more depth of sound. I'm just kind of using it as a basic delay here, but the other thing it's really good for is if you want to do those kind of minimal house kind of rolls where the delays speed up and slow down. You can take the beat sync mode off, which you'll see this button here, and then you can independently alter the delays in milliseconds. And when you do that with something like the tape delay on here, because it acts like an old analog delay, it kind of gives you this weird pitching up and down kind of sort of effect. This one doesn't, because it's a digital delay. So what this actually does is just shortens and opens. So if you were to automate the delays, let me just try and show you here. If I just copy that, if I take the beat sync off, I'm just going to turn the feedback up. You can actually, and then you can sort of take it back up again. If I just change the mix up so you can hear it a little bit better. And that can be fully automated as you go along. So what you end up with is those really kind of cool sort of Booker shady kind of, sort of stretching and expanding delay sort of sounds. Very easy to do. And if you put it onto a bus channel, obviously you can apply it to more than one instrument and get the same delay on it. So that gives you the kind of more uniform sort of sound. But here I'm just using it as a basic sort of delay. Again, just keep opening this up. Space Designer again. Go for the nearest match. So we've got piano and string reverbs here. I'm going to go for a sort of a piano room, which gives you a kind of really, a little bit sinister sort of reverb. So I'm going to a few little tricks that I sort of tend to do. Once you've got a nice groove going, and I think that's kind of a nice groove. Guru's really good for a lot of the sort of really good sort of drum tricks that you hear. If I just mute some of these off. So one of the first tricks that sort of people tend to get into is the whole kind of, you know, this kind of repeating sort of minimal sort of instruments. They're very easy to get out of Guru. What you do is you just kind of draw a 16th pattern. You want to make sure that I mentioned the grooves to you earlier that I've bounced off myself. If you zoom in here, you'll see this is the one that people tend to use for the kind of minimal sounding stuff. It's called MTV Swing. I'm not entirely sure what MTV stands for, but I'm sure someone at FX Expansion will let me know. And then I've been quantizing all of these to 50%. Now, with a lot of plugins, they tend to make the user interface is really kind of hands-on, so you can get kind of really involved in it. But sometimes it's difficult to recall, you know, exact numbers and stuff. Like I've got these set to exactly 50%, so I want to get this to be exactly 50% as well. Logic gives you an option of viewing your plugins in two ways. The first way you can view your plugins is like this, which is the graphical user interface that they've spent a long time designing for you, and you know, a long time making very pretty, so people think you've got very cool plugins. But quite often I like to dispense with that and go for a really, really boring box. It looks really boring, but what it actually enables you to do is with things like that plugin where you've just got a knob that you can turn, it gives you an actual setting for each thing. So what I want to do is I want to alter, I'm set on engine 1, which is the first button here, and I want to alter the groove amount, and I want to get it to exactly 50%. So if I go into the view and get rid of all the prettiness and zoom in, you'll see down here you've got all the engine 1 settings, master, engine 1 groove. So what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to move that to exactly 50%. There we go. And then when I go back onto here, it should have moved to the middle. Now, I know it seems really kind of, you know, you could just move the knob to the middle, but if you don't get it smack on, the delays won't match up exactly, and you won't get that kind of, you'll get flamming. So I always kind of set everything very specifically like that. And another good thing to do when you're using things like Guru is always take a copy as you're working along. If you're quite happy with some settings, before you start messing with them, just take a quick copy, and then if anything goes wrong, you can just hit the paste button after, and it pastes all the settings back on there again, so you haven't messed up. We're going to go for a sort of a clave sort of sound. For things like that, I tend to use Thomas Penton's Essential Drums and Percussion. Got to be the best collection of drums I've ever seen on sample CD. They're all 24-bit, they're all stereo, they're all immaculately sampled. And generally, straight out of the box, they all work. So we're just going to go for a clave. Minimal. Welcome to Minimal 101. So we go straight in with that, and obviously what you tend to hear is that in a lot of those sort of tracks, people do those kind of really quick sort of like rolls and stuff as well. Again, this is just something that Guru has kind of brought to the fray, I think. If you go into the graph editor, which I showed you earlier with the shifting of things, you can alter lots of different sort of parameters. One of the parameters on there is called repeat, and if you click on that, what you can actually do, let me just zoom in for you, is just pick one. So we're going to go for this note here. There we go. And then you can kind of throw some really crazy ones in there. Doesn't sound very exciting, but you can guarantee there's some minimal fans at home now wetting themselves. And again, what I tend to do as well is with things like this, that sounds great, but I like to try and inject a little bit of movement in there as well. So what I always do is I'll also go to the panning one, and I just kind of randomly throw a bit of panning around left to right. Because then this kind of maneuvers the sound around for you. So you get this kind of like sort of circling sort of drum pattern, and if you're listening to it on headphones and stuff, or in a club with a really good stereo system, it really kind of, you know, you get this real sense of movement in the percussion, and I think stuff like that's important. It's very easy to fall into the trap of just kind of throwing stuff in and leaving things in the centre and not really thinking about stuff. But panning's really important, and it's one of the kind of most basic things I think people should master when it comes to production. So we're going to throw that over the top there. Drop it down in the mix a little bit. What I also tend to do, I don't know whether this is what everyone else does, but I tend to, when I actually mix things, I tend to mix from naught upwards rather than sort of come in at a volume level and then bring everything down to suit. I tend to take everything to naught as if you're on a sort of an old mixing console, and then mix upwards, because I think it's easier to hit the right level then, you know, you get to the point. Then I'm going to go for a little bit of a reverse clap. There's two ways of doing these in here. Well, there's probably more, but I tend to favour doing them like this. I'm going to copy the clap sample that we've got here onto the next pad, which you can do just by holding down alternate, grabbing the pad, moving across, and that's doubled up the pad. Then I'm going to go into the pad edit screen, reverse, which is going to give us the reverse one. And then what I always do is I set this to, you've got a little trigger button here. And what this does is you can sort of tell the program to gate to a certain set of parameters. You can tell it to gate by itself, so each time another one of these plays, the previous one cuts off, like as if it were a monophonic synth. You can gate by colour. You'll notice that each of the pads has got its own colour. There's blue, red, yellow and green, so anytime another red one will play, it'll gate off. Or you can do it by engine, so anytime anything else on engine 1 will cut off. I'm going to do it by colour because I've got my claps already in there. And then I'm just going to throw that just there. Now you can hear there's a little bit of a gap there. So I'm going to use the shifter, which I used earlier, just to push that forwards. So it leads perfectly on. And you get that kind of really nice sort of snappy reverse. And it will cut off. About there. And again, I'm just going to take the cut off up a little bit. So there's not as much bottom end on it. Turn the volume down slightly. That just adds a little bit of liveliness into it. And then another trick that I like to do, which I think you may have seen this before, but I'm going to double check, I'm going to go over it anyway, is using the noise oscillators on Logic on their various different synths to generate sounds. I tend to use the ES1 for this. You know, you get these huge crashes and stuff on the kind of like the minimal text sort of things that are they go on forever, and they're sort of these huge sort of steam kind of noises. What I tend to use for that is I'll go into the ES1. Here you've got your oscillators. Zoom in for you. And your sub oscillator. Now you can select your sub oscillator to be an octave below, 2 octaves below, and then various sort of different variations on the octave. But you've also got the option to use an external source or a noise source. The external source will make the ES1 behave like a filter, a low pass filter, and then also, depending on what's coming in, you can actually put like a filter envelope on it and get some really kind of cool sort of funky house sort of things going on. But I'm going to use the sub oscillator set to noise. So you want to turn your mix all the way to sub. Just throw the channel back up. White noise. Get a little bit of resonance on there. And then literally, I'm just going to throw just a single held note in there. I'm going to use the force legato button again, just to make it the same length as the part. And then I'm going to time stretch the part. So if you hold down Alt, if you hold the end of it and press Alt, it puts it onto stretch mode. And I'm going to stretch that all the way to 9, and that's just giving me a really long MIDI part, really long white noise, which is just going to carry on forever. If you take the decay down slightly on the envelope, and it kind of dies off. Then one of the favourite sort of filters that I've got, which it helps me to get that sound, is Fab Filters Simplon. It's very, very basic, but it sounds fantastic. So we're just going to turn the resonance up here a little bit. We're going to go for a kind of bandpass sort of thing. Now it has actually got a bandpass filter on it, this one, but if you use a low and a high at the same time, you can kind of control the width of the band. So I'm just going to throw this onto the channel, solo that, and you can get a really good kind of crash cymbal sort of. So that's quite a good crash now. I'm going to throw a compressor on it just to keep it in check, and then I'm going to side chain the compressor to the kick so it sucks in and out. I always leave the kick on an audio channel. Even if I use a Guru kick, what I'll do is I'll put a blank kick on the audio channel, but you can hear that sort of sucking in and out now. Switch that over to peak mode because it sucks a little bit more then. And we're just going to throw that over the top. You can kind of be as subtle or as violent with them as you want as well, because by increasing the resonance, it's going to make the white noise bite even more. So you want to get a really insane one as you come back in after a breakdown. You can just throw the resonance all the way up there, open the band a little bit, and it will really kind of let fly. But obviously for this, we're going to go a little bit more sort of subdued because it's a little bit more chilled. So yeah, when I come to arrange things, if we take this as being the finished track, first thing I do is I'll group up all of my individual parts into sort of kind of like categories, if you like. So I'm just going to switch to the environment page. So we've got the kick here. I'm just going to label that up as the kick. So we need that one, and we also need the guru. Oh, let me just hitting caps lock there. And also the white noise. So they're kind of our drum parts, and I'm going to bust those to. I always kind of try and keep things grouped up into sort of groups of 10. So like, if you imagine the first 9, I'm going to use as sends and returns. So then 10 is going to be my first group. So then we can double click on that and go to here. I've got a few kind of bus settings for this. This is one of the ones I've been using most often. We've got a vintage warmer as the first part of the channel. Then I've got the power core character plugin and a limiter just on the end, just to keep it in check. The great thing about character is I've been with many producers before that have said, wouldn't it be great if we got something called the good knob, that you sort of turn things and it makes them gooder. Well, character is kind of that plugin really, because you can isolate the sort of the individual sounds that you want, percussions or synths or whatever, and then basically just kind of turn up the goodness of it. What it is is the goodness. That is exactly what it is. What it does is it kind of reads the sound that's coming into it and picks out the points at which the sound becomes most defined, and then as you turn the knob up, it increases those points. So it works differently on every instrument as well. If you put an instrument that has a frequency boost at say 1.5 kilohertz, and that's kind of where the sound is at its best, that's where character will sort of push the sound. Whereas if it's something that's got a sort of a sweet spot at around about 450 hertz, that's where character will boost it. It's a very, very clever plugin. So I'm just going to run through what I would sort of do here. I tend to use the vintage warmer kind of just as it comes, to be honest, because it's just a really good colour of sound. So I've got the drums soloed here. Oh, a little bit of an overload there, hang on. Ah, you see, good old Logic. So we'll just leave that playing as is. We'll drop the vintage warmer on, and instantly you get kind of like a bottom end boost, a little bit more drive and a little bit of saturation. Just kind of like pushing the sound just a little bit more. And then we're going to turn the good knob on. I'm just going to quickly loop up the back section of this so that it's not trying to play a million things at once. We turn the character on. Now obviously the CPU that this is using is from the power core, so it shouldn't affect the load on the computer. I've got it set to percussion mode, which is, if you have a look in the presets, you've got, you know, all these different bass boost, bass drum, bass guitar, techno, whatever. But I'm going to go with the percussion setting on it. Let me just quickly, just to try and get rid of that message. If you do get that message popping up quite a lot, which some people do, I don't know why I am, because it is an 8-core, this one. But what you can do is you can just increase the in and out buffer size, and that normally gets rid of it for you. So I'm going to move it up to 512 samples, reinitialize the program. Just give it a second, there we go, strings. back. So, fingers crossed, that's going to stop it. So I got this set on the percussion setting, and literally all you do now is just turn the character up, and it instantly picks out one of the sort of sweetest parts of the drums and amplifies them. And the really crazy thing is, like, you put it on and you think, you know, that sounds really good. And then when you take it off afterwards, you realise kind of how dull it was sounding before. It's like so flat and lifeless without that on. It's the good knob. We're going to put that limiter back on there. Again, sometimes I'll throw a bit crusher on here as well, just to prevent any sort of clipping into the red. Put the limiter back on the end there. Logic's limiter is very, very simple to use. You just tell it what you want your maximum output level to be, and then increase the gain. And that enables you to push things a lot louder than you would be able to before. So that's my basic drum strip. The next strip we're going to look at, obviously, we need to sort of mute that off for a moment. I'm going to kind of put the, let's see, we've got that. So I'm going to put the bass onto its own bus as well. And the reason I do this is because I tend to use multiple bass tracks for a single sound. The reason for this is if you're automating a bass, if you're automating, say, the cutoff on this bass, and you want to kind of open up like this. When you want it to snap back, you tend to find that Logic lags a little bit. You like see how that kind of dropped just before the bar, even though the control data's blatantly after the bar, it actually kind of drops before, or sometimes it drops after. See? No idea why. And you tend to find it does that a lot. Not just Logic, but other software as well. It's just kind of like one of those things. It takes a certain amount of time to process that curve back down, you know, to whatever you want it to go to. So what I'll always do is you've got a little button here just next to the Add Track button, and that's an add track. Add a track with the same settings. So I'll click that there. It creates another ESM track, and then I'll throw this one onto there. That means when I want to automate this one, I can leave that open without any worry of it dropping back down again. But this one will be set on 0 cutoff, so you get a nice smooth transition. But of course, obviously, both of those basses will have to go through the same processing. So rather than waste lots and lots of plugins, you know, processing one lot of bass, I'll always just run them through a single bus, and that kind of keeps them in check. So where are we? We're looking for ESM and ESM. So we're going to run those through bus number 11, which is here at the end. Now this bus can be a mono bus, and you'll notice that I tend to run all my basses as mono, and I tend to run all my kick drums as mono, for the simple reason that because they're always going to be central in your mix anyway, there's no point in having a stereo signal. If you've got a kick drum and you've got two sides of a stereo signal playing exactly the same thing, you're going to kind of lose some of the emphasis because of the fact that the two things are playing the same sound. So I always switch them to mono and just have one dead set mono kick in the middle, and like I say, quite a lot of the time I'll have the bass as mono as well. So we've got a mono auxiliary open. Let me just see what I would tend to use on here. Again, vintage warmer, because it just adds that special kind of something to a track. Set as is, just the default setting, which is just a slight amount of drive. For EQing and stuff, it varies. I mean, to be honest, most of the EQing that you're going to want to be able to do, you're going to be able to do from here. If you want a really, really good kind of analog sound, then you can go for the UAD Fairchild, which, to be honest, when I bought it purely for the way it looked. Because look at that. That is just one of the best looking plugins I've ever seen. But again, there's just a standard preset in here called bass. You throw it on and it really does give you so much bite. We're going to go with that one. So we're going to throw that on there as our compressor. And what I always tend to do with basses is I always throw a little bit of reverb or a little bit of delay on them. Not masses of it, not so that it's going to overpower the mix or anything. But I tend to find, like with a bass line like this, I'm just going to remove that automation for the moment. With a bass line like this, you can add a lot of life into it with just something very simple. So I'm just going to go to the bus. I'm just going to add Logic's standard echo plugin. We're just going to knock the repeats down to about 10. Dry on 100%, wet probably about 10. And it's almost not noticeable. I mean, it's there, and you can hear it when it's soloed. Maybe take it down to 5. The colour here is like a high pass, low pass filter. So the more you turn it up, the more it takes the bottom out. The more you turn it down, the more it takes the top off. I like it to take a little bit of the bottom off so it reduces the mud. And just that little bit there, I think, just provides a really nice kind of live, really kind of nice live sound to the bass. Again, mix from the bottom up. Logic gives you 2 settings as well of how you want to read your faders. You can read them as decibels, which is kind of like the standard, or you can read them as numbers. I always have mine set on numbers because it's a bit like the decibels thing is good, but when you've got things on numbers, it's really easy to kind of match everything up when you're mixing things down. So I can just say, okay, I've got this one at 90, I've got this one at 65, I've got this one at whatever, and I just find that you kind of, you know, you can get really sort of really accurate with your settings. So I'm just going to unsolo those now. Just bring the mix into check on here. up the we're going to bring up the ES1. And again, as I said before, panning is really important, even if it's just a little bit. So what I tend to do is you'll find that aside from my basic things like bass and drums, I'm always going to move things a little bit. So even if it's just like moving this to the side a little bit there, and then opening up the piano, and I'm going to push the piano over that side, just so that the stereo spread is good. Strings, I'm going to move quite far over there. Again, with these, you can hear the reverb's a little bit muddy because it's kind of like just kind of like over the whole thing. So I'm just going to put an EQ on. There's a great setting. It's one of the things you find with Logic is a lot of the stuff is very WYSIWYG. You know, it's kind of what you see is what you get, and everything's named perfectly. So here, there's this one called Add Brightness. And all that does is just roll a little bit of bottom end off and puts a little bit of top end on, so it makes the sound brighter. I normally elaborate on that by putting a low pass set to about 6 or 12 dB. We can go 12 on this one, and just really take some of the bottom end out. But you can find that that is a lot brighter than that. Just that extra little bit of air. We're going to bring the Korg in as well. Now, when you're using off-board gear, obviously you have to render everything in. But the great thing about Logic is it provides you with a really simple way of doing that. It lets you run your external gear almost as if it were a plugin. So you've got this little thing called external, which lets you use it as a channel strip. So you just set your channel strip to solo. When I'm rendering stuff off, I always put an empty bar before and an empty bar afterwards. That allows for a little bit of release time as the part ends, and it also means that if for some reason you've got kind of like an odd latency thing going on, or you know you've got a little bit of say the note starts before the beat or whatever, it just gives you a nice clear cut for your samples. So I'm just going to take the delay off that we put on, hit the bounce button. Remember, when you're bouncing hardware stuff, you've got to bounce in real time, not offline, because otherwise it won't work. It'll just come out of silence. Korg R3 pad, and that's going to record all of our automation on there as well. Still using no mastering plugins on here though, because obviously I don't want that to affect the sound. I'm going to leave these on because we're quite happy with those anyway. It sounds nice. When you're doing these, when you're rendering stuff off as well, it's good to take like 2 takes of everything, because the first take has normally got the kind of the initial key press, and then after that the kind of like the sound gets into its groove. So sometimes you'll get like a sound that's really harsh the first time you press it, and then the next time you change it's quite soft. The soft one's the one that you probably want. So if you take a number of takes, I'll just import this back in now. You can have it set so that it automatically imports things in, but as I said, I do everything the same way as I used to do on Logic 5.5. So for some reason, even though it's easier, I do it by hand, which just makes me a bit of a mentalist. Always normalise your samples, which I believe was a video tip that I gave you on the video from ADE. But you can see, I mean, like the difference, although it means I've got to mix it back into the thing to get the volumes right, back into the arrangements, you can see straight away you've got a much clearer waveform. It's going to be at its maximum velocity. And also one of the things to do is with something like this, it's better to normalise each channel as well, because I'm running this as stereo into there, but there's a good chance that I haven't got the left and right exactly matched up, because you can see one side's slightly bigger than the other. So it's better to do that in an external sample editor. So I'm just going to save this off. I tend to use Peak Pro. I haven't got the new version yet. I read a review in a certain magazine. It looks good. If anyone wants to send me any free software, by the way, might as well put the plea out there while you're here. Yeah, I'm on the 5.2 version of this. Absolutely brilliant piece of software. Let's just open this up. So I'm going to just highlight one side of the waveform first and normalise that. And then the other side, which should already be normalised anyway, but we're just going to double check. Yeah, you see there was no movement. And then also I'm just going to remove the DC as well. I'm not exactly sure what DC stands for, which is really bad, but I do know what it sounds like, and it gives you a really kind of off-centre sound. It can make things sound really hollow if the DC is all out of whack. So I always do that to all my samples. It's a little bit time consuming, but you tend to find you don't get any problems when you get to mastering stage. You can see just exactly how much delay, by the way, there is, how much delay there is on the from the MIDI. There's the start of the bar there, and there's the start of the actual notes. So it's quite a hefty chunk. So I'm just going to pull the bottom of that in to here, and then, as I say, I always take two takes. So I'm going to pull this to the start of the first one. And just drop that on the start of the bar, but then I'm going to loop the second take rather than the first one, because the second one's going to sound a lot more comfortable. Again, you'll see that overhanging slightly there, so I'm going to use the event float, which I always keep open up here, just to pull that back to naught. So that will give us a really tight finishing point on the sample. Copy that back. And then we should just be able to mix that in now. Take solo off. So, mastering strips. Now, a brilliant trick that I picked up a while back is quite often you'll hear a record and you'll think, oh, I love the way that the percussion sounds on that, or I love the way the drums sound on that, or something like this, and you kind of want to get that kind of vibe into your track, but you don't want to sample their drums and you don't want to sample their synths or whatever. Logic have got a brilliant EQ on here called the Match EQ, which is this one here. It doesn't look particularly brilliant. It looks a bit like the normal EQ, to be honest. I'll just zoom in for you there. But what this actually do is this will listen to a piece of audio and kind of create an EQ profile for the piece of audio that you're putting in, like a template. So say, this is quite a deep sounding thing, so I'm just going to go into my iTunes library here and find someone who's kind of deep house, let's say Dennis Ferrer or someone like that. So say I want this to have the kind of characteristics of Dennis's Sunburst Band remix, which is a brilliant track. You can hear the sort of the sound that this has got. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to import that into Logic, just drag it straight from iTunes. Then if I solo this track, turn the match EQ on and put it onto learning mode. Let's just turn the volume up a little bit, it'll probably help. So if I just click the learn button, you can see it starts to analyse where all the frequencies are in the track. And then you just hit the match button, and here is the profile that it's created. So I'm going to delete Dennis now. And just go back to my master strip. Now basically you've got like the amount of application here. I'm going to set that to the center, to 0. And there's my raw material. And then as I turn this up, it kind of applies the template. So you can sort of get a little bit of his EQ sound into the mix and kind of liven things up a little bit. Obviously that one, you know, the sounds are probably reasonably similar. But I mean, if you were to put, you know, something like, you know, if I were to get, say, like, I don't know, just a raw kind of ES1 and kind of learn that, you can see it's kind of all based around the centre there. That's quite a quite a different story. And then you could apply that, so I'll make my whole track sound like it's an ES1, and it sounds horrible. But you can see it's a really good way of capturing someone else's sound and the essence. If you really like the way someone's got a really nice top end fizz on their sound or whatever, you can be really cool with it. I think I've got a couple in here already. I've got one off an Adam K record, which was a really nice kind of mastering setting. And again, you can hear it was his top end I was going for on this one. So you can just apply that. And it's just that little bit of sheen that you kind of get off someone else's EQ. So that's pretty cool. Right, some of my favourite mastering strips. Let's have a look what we've got here. Okay, I've got loads, absolutely loads. One of the most basic ones that I started off using and still really, really works is just the Logic multipressor here and Logic's add limiter here. Now I leave the add limiter exactly as it is because that's kind of like a really kind of raw setting. And then there is a preset on here called Linear Soft. So I just throw that in there. And this is just a really basic kind of slam. And the best way to see, kind of what these do is to sort of quickly sort of do a little render. So if I just do an offline bounce of these so you can see them as they come out, we just hit the bounce button there. This is basic master 1. So we're just going to run that through. And then if I open that back up for you, I'll just open it in Peak. And you'll see kind of how much it sort of pushes things. This is what I used on all the old stuff, like things like the remix I did for Book of Shade and all the stuff that I did with the Trophy Twins and stuff. This was all the basic. This is all the basic master strip. So you see, it pumps everything kind of out. Doesn't block everything quite like some others do, but it's a really nice, clean, master. Then the next one I've got, which is a sort of a newer one that I've developed when I got my UADs, is this one, which is gainer at the start, channel EQ so you can add any final tweaks to it. Again, multi-presser, just set on one of the default settings, and then the UAD Precision, which is their kind of like top-end sort of limiter thing. This provides much more of a slam, and the great thing about this limiter is you can really drive it quite hard, and it'll push to a really sort of flat, a flat peak. So that's kind of another one I've got there, and then I sort of tweaked that one as well and moved that into same arrangement, but then I'm using the LA2A as the limiter on this one, and this drives things so loud. If I show you the peak that you get on this one, we'll call this UAD Master 2, and just do a quick offline bounce of this as well. This plugin's become one of my favourites over time. Like when I very first got it, I was a little bit kind of like, oh, there's not many knobs on it, it doesn't look very good. But in fact, it's probably one of the best ones that I own. It does the job, and it does it so well and so viciously. I can't really fault it. You can see that exactly the same thing, but massive difference. It's brought all of the bottom end right to the fore of the mix. You know, really kind of levels it all up. You can get masses of volume out of it. I mean, it's huge. Then we've also got this one, which I've recently created. One of the brilliant things you can do is quite often, because people love the UADs, but a lot of people can't afford to have the card. So a lot of other plugin companies have kind of, I'm not saying that they've copied anything off UAD or anything like that, but certain companies, not mentioning any names, but I'm sure you'll recognise the plugin, have kind of made sort of replicas of classic software within their thing. So this, I'm not saying it looks like a Fairchild, I'm just saying it looks like a Fairchild. And there's some brilliant presets on here for mastering, and because the controls are exactly the same as the Fairchild, but iCame Multimedia know way more about mastering than I do, you can actually open up your UAD and just copy the controls. There's your lateral left and right constant, just like there are here. Your threshold there, and I've got them all set to exactly the same settings as this, but obviously I've got the UAD sound. So it's a little bit of a blag, but it does mean that you can get a really good master. You know, if you're not too sure of how to use something like this, and I'm not, you know, you can. The professionals have put together the presets on the other piece of software, so you can sort of kind of pinch their sort of presets as a starting point and then work from there. And this one, I've also used the Isotope Ozone. I think I'm on version 4 now. I think I bought the upgrade the other day. Just on the CD mastering setting, so that's for my compression, and I've just used this to kind of give it the vintage sound, and then this on the end to give us the limiting. And again, this is this one works really well with kind of electronic, more electronic-y sort of electro sort of stuff, because it's a really clean wave. And again, I'll just do a bounce for you so you can have a look. I'm going to call this the blagged Fairchild master. There we go. But the sound that this gives you is so good. I mean, I think I'm going to have to get one at some point, an original one, if I can find one. Because they're pretty, you know, if the software is anything to go by, then the original is going to be amazing. So just boot up peak again. Now, that doesn't seem so loud, but obviously it just needs normalising because I've turned the volume down. So again, you can see the difference. Rather than the first one was really clean, the second one forced everything really big. This one kind of groups everything. It doesn't quite peak at the top because it's a sort of an analog emulation, so it's a little bit sort of more, sort of random. But you'll hear the sound is a really nice squeeze. You know, it gives you a really good... It's sort of if I was doing either kind of like electro or justice-y sort of stuff, or, you know, that whole head banger kind of vibe, I'd probably use a mastering thing like this because it gives you that real kind of analog sort of sound. And that's pretty much it, really. I mean, you know, I'm not one for masses of tricks and masses of technology, to be honest. I kind of like to let the music sort of speak for itself, really. But hopefully there's some stuff that you can take away.